Hello and welcome to the Extended Greg YouTube channel. I'm Greg, and on today's show we're going to be looking at upgrading Alpine Linux. So we've previously covered a video where we've installed Alpine Linux, and now that a new version, major version has come out, which is 3.19, we're actually going to want to upgrade it. There's some new, there's a new kernel that we can implement, as well as some new packages and things like that that will start to be becoming the mainstream development. So we want to make sure that we're staying up to date as much as possible, so we can also take advantage of security fixes, etc. So we're going to cover two methods today. So we're going to do a manual upgrade, which is a little bit intensive, but then we're going to cover an automatic upgrade. I've written a script to be able to do the upgrade process automatically, as well as provide some additional diagnostic details so you kind of get an understanding of what's going to break when you do the upgrade. So let's go ahead and get right into it. Alright, so first thing that we're going to do is we're actually going to log in to our Raspberry Pi. In this case, I'm using a Raspberry Pi Model 3B. And realistically, it works on all of them. I've actually tried it on all of the hardware, and it does work. But I will say this, if you skip major swaths of versions and go, for example, from 3.11 something to 3.19 directly, it is very likely because of package differences that it will break. So the packages are what will break your system, but I was able to at least consistently get everything to boot up correctly. So depending on what your application is for your Alpine Linux installation, you may need to do some break fix to get it back up and running fully. But beyond that, the core OS, the upgrade is pretty straightforward. But the first thing that we want to do before we do anything is we actually want to go in and take a backup of our LBU or APK OVL file, which is what gets saved or created when you do LBU commit. So let's go ahead and do that first. So I'm going to use FileZilla. We're going to log in through SSH. So I'm going to type in the IP address for the Pi. And I'm going to log in as root in this case, but if you set up a separate user, you'd have to log in using that if you blocked your root account. I'm going to type in my very secure password, and I'm going to use port 22, which is SSH. When we log in, it takes us to the home directory for the whatever user we logged in. But we want to navigate over to /media /mmcblk0p1, which is, in this case, the boot drive. That's the SD card. We're going to scroll down, and we'll see our APK OVL file. It's going to be named whatever you named your system. So the system hostname .apk OVL, I'll actually span this out here a little bit, .tar.gz. And in this case, I've created a folder on the desktop. I've already navigated to it, but you'd want to obviously navigate to wherever you want to save it on your local machine. And then you would just copy it over. This way you have a valid backup. So in the event that you actually have an issue with the upgrade, you have a way to go back. And we're going to find out one additional piece of information before we actually do the upgrade. So we're doing the manual upgrade path first, just so we get an understanding also when we go through the automatic upgrade, what it's doing. So I'm going to switch over the KVM really quick. We're going to actually look at the console of the Pi. Okay, I'm going to log in. Okay, so we're logged in right now, and pretty much we want to find out what our current version is. So we can do cat, which will output the total contents of a file. And we're going to do /etc. And then if we hit dot, we can do Alpine. Actually, let's do ls first. So ls/etc. we see Alpine Release. I'm sorry, it doesn't have a dot in front of it. So we're going to do cat /etc. /Alpine Release. Okay, and it tells us, in this particular case, it's the 3.18.4. So we're going to go from 3.18.4 skip 3.18.5 and go straight to 3.19.0. So that's our upgrade path. But now that we know our version, we actually want to just download a backup copy of that. So we'll switch back over to the PC. And on here, we're going to go to the alpinelinux.org. And there's two files that we could just download right off the bat. The first one is we want to download our particular architecture of the latest version, which is going to be on the downloads page directly. Now, there's two links that show up for each one. One of them is an ISO, or at least an image, I'm sorry, but that's just it's an image of a disk. So if you extract it using, for example, Raspberry Pi Imager, it will actually be able to accept that directly. But the other one is a tar.gz. We're going to be working with the tar.gz, but technically the contents of them are the same. But before we do that, we want to actually download that same version that we currently have in case we need to roll back. So we scroll down to the bottom, we click older versions, and here we'll see a listing of all the available versions that are still here. So it's all version 3. So we're going to go to version 3.18. We're going to go to releases. We're going to choose our architecture. Now, how do you know your architecture? If you don't already know, and generally speaking for like Pi 5, it'll always be AArch64 just because that's the only thing that's supported. But we have a couple of options that we could use for the Pi version 3. So let's actually go back and take a look how to see that. So if we do uname -a, it will tell us. And if we look, it says ARM v7.1. And pretty much that's ARM v7. So when we actually download it, that's the current version that we're on. We want to download that same architecture. There's another way to find it as well. We can also do cat/etc/apk, and it's under Arch, assuming I can read it. And we see it says ARM v7, which corroborates what we said. It does not always match if you migrated this from an earlier version of Raspberry Pi that may have used ARMHF, for example. But in this case, it does match. So we go back over to our computer. We'll choose ARM v7. And then we're going to scroll down. There's a lot of options here because there's a lot of images because it has all of the subversions within it. But we're looking for the one that says Alpine-RPi. So we want version 3.18.4. So we see it here, and we see 4 files with that version. The first one is our tar.gz. That's the one that we want in this particular case. We also see that it has .asc, SHA-256, and SHA-512. Those are checksums if we wanted to validate our particular download. To make sure that it was integral before we moved forward, we could use that to be able to do so. But for our particular case, because we're downloading this on Windows, it will perform effectively an equivalent of that automatically. It will tell us if it's failed. But if we were downloading it on Linux and in the automatic script, it will actually do that as well. It will validate that. So we're going to click this in order to download it. We're going to navigate to where I have that folder, so under upgrade files on the desktop. And I'm just going to dump it here. Okay, so at least we have it pre-downloaded in the event that we need to roll back. We're not guessing or thinking, oh, was it this version or this version? We still have the system up and available to be able to check whatever we would need to verify that we're getting the right version to make it work again if we have to roll back. So now we can go back to the main downloads page. If we go under Raspberry Pi, we know we have ARM v7. So we're going to look for the one that says .tar.gz, which is the top one in this particular case. And we're going to click that to download it. And we're going to save it to the same location. So now that we've had it down, now that we have everything downloaded, we're going to shut down our system. And we could just unplug it, but for the purposes of demonstrating it here, I'm actually going to type halt. Okay, and that's just going to pretty much stop execution, shut down all services, and shut it down gracefully. And once it completely shuts off, which it has, I'm going to unplug it. And I'm going to take the micro SD card, and I'm going to put it inside a card reader attached to the PC. So I'll switch back over to there so we can see it pop up. Okay, so we see right here, we do see it did show up, but we actually want to open that up. So these are all of the files on the root of our drive, and it's formatted FAT32, so we can read and write to it as we would normally. Now we notice the file that we just downloaded is also here. We could copy it here if we wanted to, but I always find it better just to get all the materials in order before we start trying to modify the system. So there's two things that we're going to leave in this folder. Otherwise, we're pretty much going to delete everything else. Okay, so we're going to delete APKs, we're going to delete boot, we're going to delete overlays, we're going to delete everything except for cache. And we're also going to leave our APK OVL file. So easy way to do that, I'm just going to choose one above the bottom, hit shift, and then control click and leave cache. And what cache is it's pretty much the current packages that it's using. It will automatically update that as it's going, and it won't be overwritten by the files that we're dropping in. But the rest of everything else that's here will be contained within the distribution package that we're currently trying to load. So we can go ahead and delete those. And something else is there's nothing to prevent you from actually copying all of those files into a folder somewhere if you wanted to roll back that way. So just something to keep in mind. So now we want to open up our 3.19.tar.gz file. All right, in this case, I'm using WinRAR just because I like the way that it operates a bit better. Windows does have the ability to natively read the actual tar.gz files, but I found it doesn't handle dot files very well. So specifically the .alpine release here, which is a hidden file on Linux, it doesn't actually know how to handle that yet. So it's a bit of a bug that still has to be worked out, so maybe in the future it will work, but for today it doesn't. So we're just gonna click the double dots up here, which will pretty much allow us to extract the entirety of the archive over to the SD card. And we're going to click in as our destination being that SD card. And we're gonna hit OK. Now comes the exciting process of watching paint dry as it copies over. But pretty much it's replacing all of those files that we just deleted. Once this is done, we're going to boot into the OS, and we're going to have to run a few commands in order to get everything up to date. And specifically, the big thing is APK is not going to have the new repositories defined because it's potentially just going to have the previous version, which obviously won't get us the most up-to-date packages. So we'll go through that in a second as soon as we boot, but we do see it finish copying. And if we go back over to our drive, we now see all of those files that we deleted previously now exist. So great. We can eject the drive. Make sure you eject it safely. It's FAT32, so you cannot just pull it out. So it says it's safe to remove. I'm going to remove it from the reader, place it back into the Raspberry Pi, and we're going to power it up. So let's switch over to that now. So it should still be loading the old packages that we had. And if the installation was too old, obviously it may not be compatible or interoperable. So just something to keep in mind is you will definitely need direct console access to the machine to do the manual method. With the automatic script, I did try and make it so at least it would boot up with networking and SSH intact, regardless of how far back you went, pretty much, or at least till 3.11, which is all I tested. But we see we're back at a login prompt. And we see it says, "Welcome to Alpine Linux," and it's version 3.19. So let's go ahead and log in. And at this point, let's just VI and take a look at our APK repositories. And we see that they're currently still on 3.18. Now we could go in and just update this manually, but the address could change or any number of things that makes it so that's not necessarily the best option. So what we're going to do is we're going to comment these out. So we're just going to put a hashtag in front of them that will make it so they don't exist. But we're going to leave the top line, which is the media mmcblk/APKs, which are our local repository on the SD card. We're going to leave that still uncommented. We're going to save that out, and then we're going to do setup APK repos. And we're just going to do this one interactively, but there is a way to do it through the command line. But we're just going to keep it simple for now. So we're going to do APK repos. And notice how this has changed from the previous versions a little bit. It no longer shows us the list by default. But in our case, we know we do want to choose the first option, which is the standard the Alpine Linux managed CDN for their packages, which is actually just where we downloaded our files from for the installer. So for this, we're just going to choose the number 1, which is the default. Now we do have the option before we hit that to enable community repositories here. So we're going to go ahead and do that by pressing C first. We see it loops around. It says community repository enabled, and then we're going to hit enter for number 1. It's going to get an updated list, and then it's going to generate the file. So now if we go back into our repositories list, we see that the new version is here, although it looks like it's still on 18. So in that particular case, it didn't actually update because it didn't use the updated files. So that actually is an oversight on my part. I'm just going to delete those files. Let's do an update first. It's going to use the local packages for this, but it should also update the other files as well. So we're going to do APK upgrade. And I'm just going to run that once more. Otherwise, we will just have to change the number, and then we can do that step later if it changed. Now it's stuck on 18. So we're going to change this over to 19 because we do know that we're running 19 currently. So now when we exit, and we do APK update, we see we have 21,801 packages available. So now we can do APK upgrade. Meow. While it's upgrading, Nala is going to come in and say hello. And say hello? She's hopefully not going to start dancing on the keyboard, because that's just going to make things interesting. So it's updating a lot of packages, and mainly because it's obviously a new version, so everything is brand new. And also at some point with the older versions of the OS, they're going to stop updating the actual operating system entirely. So anything in that repository for that older version will just be a stale version of that particular package, because nobody really wants to test it, and nobody's going to add it if they haven't tested it. So now that we see that everything has been upgraded, just for show, I'm going to go in and I'm actually going to do the same thing that we just did for the repositories, and we're just going to add it again. So I'm just going to delete these two, or we'll just comment them out. And let's just do the setup Alpine again, or excuse me, setup APK repos. I'm just going to do the shorthand for it, which is -C for community repositories enabled, -1 for the number of the repository we want to use. It'll update the list. And it still didn't do it. That's interesting. So it didn't update the APK files. Which is different than testing, but I'm just going to uncomment it. If you do the 3.19 for version 19, it will match. You just leave off the minor version update. So we'll save that out. Now, the big thing is, we want to make sure that everything is saving and synced as far as our current cache and everything else like that. So the next thing we want to do is just do setup APK cache. It will give you the default option, just like we were doing setup Alpine. We hit enter, and from there, it's done. So we can do APK cache sync. And what this command does is it will actually update everything within that cache folder. It will remove anything that's old, and it will keep everything that's new that's currently installed on the system. And in this case, it didn't have to do anything. Wonderful. So from there, we're going to just do LBU as well, and then we'll do LBU save, and we'll try rebooting. So we're going to do setup LBU. It's going to ask us where we want to save it, mmcblk, that is a default, and that's it as well. And we'll do LBU commit -d. Now we can reboot. And at this point, everything would be installed and updated, and it would either be working, assuming that we didn't have any package differences that would cause any of our programs that we created and are running to not work. But generally speaking, you know, there's nothing, at least within the operating system, that's preventing it from running on the new version. And because we replaced all of the underlying files in the operating system, it is just like doing a clean install, with the exception of whatever changes our OVL file is applying after the system initially boots. So we still see it says 3.19. We see that everything is on the new kernel, which is 6.6.4. It was a different version previously. We can log in again. And it's all set to go. So a little bit in depth, we can actually, we'll do the same thing that we did earlier, and we'll do cat/etc Alpine version. And we see it does say 3.19. So we've successfully upgraded our system. And it only took us 15 minutes, 20 minutes. So realistically, not too bad, but there's another way that we can do it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to quickly shut down the system, not gracefully. And I'm going to replace it with another SD card that I have prepared back at 18.4. All right, we're going to let that boot. And pretty much what we're going to do is we're going to run a script. So while that's coming up, let's go back over to the machine, and we'll just, to the computer, and we'll just look through the file. And looking through this is going to take longer than actually running it. But I've created a GitHub that actually has pretty much two files in it. A README that kind of takes you through what the methodology behind it is, and then specifically gives you the command to run it, and then also incorporates some troubleshooting, things like that. But then we actually have the file itself. And I'm just going to run through this quickly, but it's doing effectively the steps that we did before, plus a few additional things, in order to make going into the installation with your eyes open a lot easier. So what it will actually do is it will go through, it will pull down and cross-check everything in terms of whether you're on your current release or not, whether you can upgrade, but it will go through and verify individual packages and things like that. So it's going to give you the version that you're on, the version that you're going to, your current architecture. So if you did want to pull back those same kind of recovery files, it's easy enough to do so. It will tell you what it is. It will also go through each individually installed package, and it will let you know if any of them are missing from the new repositories that are available on the new OS versus your current repositories and your currently installed packages. So if it tells you no, then obviously it's not going to be upgraded and it may not work in the new version. Going through here, and it also logs everything, which I think is something very nice, but it will update everything. So it'll bring everything to the current version. It will also synchronize the cache in order to clean it. And it will create some files specifically to run once after it starts up. And they're self-destructing files, so it will pretty much install them, and then as soon as it runs, they will actually remove themselves from the drive. So there's nothing that's left behind after the installation is complete. But this will go through, and this will actually, from the console, make sure that all of the packages are working, make sure that networking is up and SSH, etc. as a function of that, and from there be able to get you back up and running, or at least make the machine accessible depending on what version you're going from and to. So pretty much that's where, that's what it's going through and doing. So it will do cleanup, it'll do the removal, etc. So let's go back to the README. I'm not going to read through all this. You can read this on your own time. I put a link down in the description to this actual GitHub. But the key thing is in the how to use section, we just need to copy this one line. All right, and we're going to log in through SSH in order to do this, because the idea is if you're running a headless system, you really want it to come back. You don't want to have to hook up console access to a remote system somewhere. So let's log in here. Okay, and we're gonna just use the credentials, very secure password, and we're in. So now that we're here, we've copied that code, or we copied that line. We're just gonna paste it in, and we're gonna hit enter. I'm gonna make this full screen. And I will say this, because of the way that this probably is, I literally just installed these, so it may not actually stop and wait at every indication, but if you haven't upgraded your system in a while, it may take a second. But we're going to try and catch it as it's doing the reboot. So right now it's just saying that there's a difference in the architecture because it says ARM v7, but our UNIM says ARM v7.1, which is totally fine. So we're going to continue on with that because 7.1 is a subset of 7. So it shows us we're going from 3.18.4 to 3.19.0, which is the current release. And it updates the current release dynamically based on what is actually in the latest release on the Alpine website. So as newer versions come out, the same script will continue to be able to pull from that. And same thing with the package checklist, everything else like that is pulled dynamically from their website based on what they deem to be the latest release. But it's going and doing the package impact check right now, so it's going through each individual installed program. And I will say this as well, I've installed FFmpeg as well as VLC, so just so there's something installed that we can test after the fact and make sure it's still working. So there's quite a few extra packages than would be if you had nothing installed or just a simple custom script. So, and we see FFmpeg there. But we'll let this run for a second. If we do decide ever to skip this, because if we download it, for example, and just called it directly without it going through the wget command from the GitHub site, we can actually choose to skip this, and it goes a lot faster. So if you're deploying this and you have it stored locally, things like that, you could just download the file and then choose to run it and skip the checks every time if all of the systems are the same. And the key thing here is that we're not having to do anything extra. Now, it looks like there's a huge list of stuff coming here, but what it's going to give us at the end is actually a summary. So pretty much as it's going to go through and find any no's, if it does, where it would cause it to stop and actually prompt us, it would just say what those no's were. It wouldn't tell us all of the yeses, since there's obviously going to be a lot more of those. So let's keep letting it chug away here. Nala's very into it, so. So it's definitely something where in the future I do want to add other things besides the Raspberry Pi to this particular script. And I do have it staged for that kind of detection, but in this particular case, the way that other systems actually update is a lot different than the way the Raspberry Pi updates. Because the Raspberry Pi is going to do just a FAT32 pretty much file copy onto the SD card, where other systems you actually have to run setup-bootable in order to get those to be able to pretty much install and create a bootable drive on a USB thumb drive or a hard drive to be able to do that. So there's definitely a lot of additional testing and use cases there that just weren't practical to be able to include in this particular demo. And I am going to just create a subclip of this to share as a separate video that's more condensed, where I kind of fast forward through a lot of these things based on this live stream today to be able to make it so it's a quick reference opposed to going through the long form that we're doing now. And this is exciting stuff here, but it's doing quite a bit of checking where it is actually going through and indexing both the main repository as well as the community repository. So if you didn't have community repository enabled, because something it's doing is transposing whether you had the community repository enabled previously in order to be able to preserve that when it goes through after the reboot. So as a function of that, it's going to scan the community repository to see if it's yes or no, since you had it enabled, and you may have packages installed from it. One thing I do want to mention is that if you have something from the Edge repository, and especially in older versions, that was one of the options that was available in addition to the community repository, the Edge repository will actually put you into an alpha state, and it kind of breaks everything. So it will automatically take you out of the Edge repository, and it will not include that since that's technically a different branch. So at least in the newer versions. So as far as that's concerned, it will alert you that if those packages no longer exist. Otherwise, it will downgrade those packages in order to do it, and then you can re-enable it. So it will save a backup copy of your current repository list, but then it will go through and you can add it back in and reinstall those packages. But it will keep a log of whatever it detected ahead of time on the actual root of the boot drive of the SD card, so you can go back and reference it in the future. So just something to keep in mind is I had to remove a few edge cases there, just otherwise it created some complexities that caused some unpredictable behavior. But outside of that, it does still work very stably and is consistent in terms of going between the different OSs. Right? Oh, and this is where things get good. Okay, so it did not find any no's. And as a result of that, it's moving forward. It is currently upgrading all of the packages to ensure that they're at the most recent version, which has the best chance of actually doing things. So now it's going to download the current version of the OS, right? So it just did that. It downloaded the checksum file, and it's comparing them. It confirmed that they did in fact match each other, and based on that, it is going to proceed with the upgrade. So it just finished the upgrade, and now it's going to reboot. So we're going to switch back over to the Raspberry Pi, and we're going to watch it do the boot cycle. So we do see it currently loading all of the packages as normal, everything else like that, but we're going to see it start going into its text prompts. And specifically, the startup script is going to run in the foreground when it boots, even though it's registered as a service. So we do see networking started successfully. We see it starting the crony and everything else like that. And now we see it starting to run everything else. So it created the repositories. It's going through, it's upgrading everything. So it's bringing it up to the most recent version because it did, of course, make the APK repository list based on the .19 version. Now it's synchronizing the actual drive. And again, if this was headless and you just had this running after you logged out of a SSH, you wouldn't need direct console access like we have here. And once it finishes, it says upgrade complete, and then it goes back to a regular login prompt. So if we go back over to the computer, and it didn't take that long, right? So now that we're over here, which I gotta kick it once, there we go. Okay, so now that we're back over here, I'm going to just reactivate this by restarting the session. And we can log in. Right, and when we do cat/etc Alpine Release, we see we're now on 3.19. So the upgrade was completed successfully. And if we actually do cat/etc apk/repositories, we do see 3.19 is listed as being the current repository. So I don't know why when we did it manually a minute ago, it didn't come up with 3.19. But when we do it this way, it does work. So I'm not sure about that inconsistency. But point being is that as far as everything is concerned, we're now on a full 3.19 release. We can do FFmpeg, which is one of the apps I had installed. We see it does run. We can do VLC. We get the warning message, although we don't have anything to run right now. But we do see that both of these are fully installed. And if we do APK update, we see that it is currently updating from those from the repositories for 3.19. So at this point, everything is done. If there was an event that, for example, if the clock was not synchronized, and this is one of the things that I think is important to note because it's in Raspberry Pi, unless you have a Raspberry Pi 5, and you have the battery connected for the real-time clock, there's a chance that you may not have a synchronized clock, which could cause SSL errors when you're actually running it. If we were to take this code again and rerun it, we see that it won't let us upgrade. And it says, well, now it's saying, do you still want to upgrade to the previous version or to the newest version with the package, blah, blah, blah. We're just going to hit yes on that. But you see here, it says, you're already the latest version of Alpine Linux. Move along, nothing to see here. Would you like to rerun the finishing script instead? So in the event that there was an issue that prevented you from running the finishing script, when it did start back up, now granted, it should still start back up with networking by default, but in the event it wasn't able to finish running, you could just rerun the script. It will detect that you're already on the current version and offer to skip the installation to just rerun that script. And it doesn't require an additional reboot in order to do that. It will just rerun the script directly. So I just put that in there just so that way you can kind of rectify any issues and then be able to rerun it, and it's as if it had the time synchronized initially. So that's pretty much what I have for today. So those are the two options available, which is to do it the manual way or to do it the automatic way using the script. I think the script is a lot easier and allows you to be able to validate in a lot more granular detail without having to do it manually or just fix things on the back end. So thanks for watching the video today. If you liked the video, be sure to hit that like button and leave a comment down below. And if you know anybody who would like these kinds of videos, be sure to share it with them. I would appreciate it, and I hope they would appreciate it too. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. It helps me out a lot with the YouTube algorithm. And, hit that notification bell as well. That way you know the next time we're getting extended. So until then, take care.